Well, hello from the Stadio Olimpico, where Ireland have edged Italy 22 points to 17. They got that bonus point win. Dan Sheehan scored a hat-trick of tries. Hugo Keenan got the other. But Italy will certainly be left wondering after their 3 cards. Rory O'Connor and Cian. Tracey are here with me. Rory, what do you make of that?
Yeah, it's a curious way to end the championship where you've won 4 out of 5. But it looks like they're going to finish third, certainly second at best, based on what we're, at the time of recording.
Yes.
A bit like last year, a tournament that started very well, but the performance got worse as they went along. I mean, I don't know. When you're comparing it to last week, I think it was almost worse in some ways than last week. They made Italy look very good. Italy, I think, played very well, but caused them problems that you would expect them to be able to deal with. And again, you're just left with a lingering sense that this team is probably in need of renewal, that there's an important 6 months coming, and when Andy Farrell comes back in, they need to find some new legs, some fresh players from the kind of hinterland around the team. So it's a disappointing way to finish, even though they got the result. I mean, the fact that they kicked the ball off the pitch at the end, it reminded me a little bit of Shizuoka when Joey Carberry kicked the ball off with a penalty. Just kind of summed up the whole day. Nice scenes when the 3 players were saluting the fans. 30,000 Irish people paid to come over. They seem to be having a good time. But I think if you're talking to Simon Easterby after the game, it did look like they were pretty disappointed with the way they played. Before
we get your thoughts, Cian, just a reminder that rugby coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia ahead of the Women's Six Nations. Energia's Half a Fan campaign is calling on rugby fans to bring their support to the Irish women's team, with Ireland looking to build on last year's big win over New Zealand. There's never been a better time to cheer them on, with home games coming up in Belfast on March 22nd and against Cork as well on April 12th. Cian, your thoughts on that?
An anticlimax, I would say. Look, it's not a great surprise that Ireland aren't going to, as we record, are unlikely to win the championship. That's not really what I'm disappointed with. I'm disappointed that they've signed off the Six Nations with 2 really poor performances. There was so much wrong with that today. It's hard to know where to start, and maybe the start is the best place to start, because think back to how poor Ireland were in terms of not taking their chances in the first 20 minutes against France. Potentially might have been a different game had they, and it was the same here, except it was all Italy early on, and the try that they scored was a sensational try. We'd highlighted in the build-up. I thought Tommaso Menicello, once again, like, what a player he is. Only 22 years old. He is a serious talent, and it was fully deserved. And Ireland actually got the Hugo Keenan try was against a run of play. I think most people would agree. They've developed this habit, and they did it throughout November as well, of compounding errors. It's unbelievably frustrating. I mean, was there 3 balls that they threw into touch?
23 handling errors across the game.
Incredible. Yeah. And it's like they make one and then they don't follow it up with a positive action the next time. They speak so often about being next moment focused, where they've developed a really worrying habit, conceding really silly penalties, like Gary Ringrose's penalty that he gave away in the first half, coming back from an offside position. I thought really summed up, I think, how Ireland's discipline has also slipped, and that was an issue. Look, you've touched on it, Sinead. They were lucky in the sense that Italy's discipline was absolutely shocking, and if they had didn't have those 3 cards, it could have been a very different game. But there was sloppy knock-ons, there was penalties for crossing. I thought it was a bad day for the attack as well. Look, they scored a really nice try, set-piece move that Hugo Keenan scored, but they really had to rely on the maul. And look, there's no problem with scoring maul tries. Unbelievable for Dan Sheehan to score a hat-trick and extend his record as the Six Nations all-time highest try scorer. But I just thought the attack was worryingly flat, because, again, this was a much stronger 23 than Ireland had last week. We were expecting a big response, but we didn't get it at all.
What for you is the most worrying part?
I think the energy of the team. They don't look. It's funny at the end, and at the end, like they went around and saluted the fans, and it felt a little bit like the 23 World Cup. There was so many Irish people here, and there was some lovely scenes, but the performance is so far off the level in terms of execution, but also energy that they were able to bring at that time. And I just think they look like an ageing team. I know it's been a bit of a theme this week, and I think there's been a bit of an accusation that we in the media and fans have been too reactive to the last week's performance, but you can't help but wonder if the team is in need of a big charge of youth. The problem is there's no obvious candidates out there really to come in and infuse it with that youth, but they looked a bit one-paced at times, as they have done through the tournament. Defensively poor, like all the things Cian's talked about. I just think we've reached a point in the cycle, and with the 3 players retiring, it's happening a little bit naturally. Summer tour, all that sort of stuff. I think we need to see a breath of kind of a fresh air come into the setup and give it a bit more energy coming in by the time we get to that November window.
Because we talked about it last week, if that defeat to France, how damaging it could possibly be. Does that look like a team as well that it just had lost its confidence?
They looked hungover. Like the French defeat has lingered throughout the course of the week in terms of the Dupont injury. Even at Thursday's team announcement, we were still talking about it, which was fair enough because Simon Easterby, in my view, had to come out and
defend his players.
Of course, so that's dragged on through the course of the week, and I thought Ireland looked like a side who were carrying the burden of the manner of the defeat. Look, they led a shot at history. Like, they'll be waiting, I think, a long time to put themselves in with a shot of potentially winning 3 Six Nations titles in a row. But even if they had gotten the favours from Wales and Scotland, their performances over the last 2 weeks, it would have felt hollow, I think.
Really, because Wales wasn't great either.
Wales wasn't great either.
I thought the way it finished, it kind of felt like a good win at the time, but now it looks like they started with their strongest performance, and it's got
which they did last
worse.
year as well.
Maybe Scotland was maybe the most complete performance, but
that was the same last year too. But they hit their peak, and I've touched on the start. For so long, this team's calling card was starting fast, and I think back to the New Zealand tour. They've completely gone away from that. They're lacking a clinical edge in the red zone deep in the 22 when they get there. Finlay Bealham got held or the double movement for the try, but in my mind, it just requires a little bit more patience. Like, Ireland just seems they get so much white line fever when they get in there, instead of just staying patient and building through another couple of phases, because they had advantage there as well, and that's been a common theme for a while as well. So, like I said, it's the next time we're going to see this Ireland team is going to be in Chicago in November, because, like you said, Rud, it's going to be a development tour. There's going to be what you think would be lots of Irish guys going on the Lions tour, but the last 2 weeks...
Do you think, how much do you think that's changed?
Last 2 weeks hasn't been great.
Andy Farrell's as we speak, he's in Cardiff watching England's rampant English performance, and really, I think if you play well against the Wales or in Italy, it doesn't necessarily do you a huge amount of credit because they're so poor, but if you play badly against a Wales or in Italy, well, that can be quite damaging, and Andy Farrell will have some decisions to make about some of his kind of most trusted players. I think Gary Ringrose is in Lions trouble now again. He missed the last 2 tours. He was unlucky, but he hasn't really had a great championship, and he's not alone in that. There's a couple of players who, Matt Hansen did a lot of great things out there, but also defensively.
For the first try.
The first try, and he was asleep for the try that brought Italy back into the game. So they're not leaving, like, they came into this tournament with such bulletproof reputations about and such a strong position when it came to Lions, but as they've gone on, and Italy kind of overpowered them at times again today. They look quicker than them at times. Their backline looked a more cohesive, more dangerous unit, and that's got to be a worry for these players. You
wrote about this morning about the absence of Andy Farrell. How much of a part do you think that is in this?
This is not a reflection of Simon Easterby's abilities, but I think it's interesting that they didn't. Well, they brought Johnny Sexton in, really, I suppose, as a kind of a consultant, but he's an inexperienced coach himself. He was here today, the second week in a row he's been in the coaching box. But there was an option there to go and get, say, Felix Jones or someone from the provinces to con them in to add to the workload, because Simon Easterby took on an awful lot here. He's in charge of defence, but he's also trying to manage all the other stuff.
Sure.
And when we asked Caelan Doris and Simon Easterby about it, they admitted that they have missed him, that his presence is so strong. He runs the attack shape didn't look that good there today. You've got
it hasn't really looked good.
No, apart from the England second half, maybe. And a lot of that was like they just got on top of England and suddenly they looked like really dominant. But he runs the attack shape. He's in charge of it. He drives those standards, and he wasn't here. And he hasn't been there, and maybe that's one of the reasons they've tailed off as they've gone on. They've missed his presence and his voice, and they hope, I think, that in the vacuum that he's left, other people have stepped up and that will stand to them long term, and that's the upside of it. But I think it's clear that they have missed him across the window, and you question whether he actually had to go and do it, like whether he could have done what he's doing while also coaching Ireland, or that's one for another day. If he gets the job again in 4 years' time, maybe the RFU will lobby hard to keep him around, because it's been a big sacrifice to leave the team, and I'm sure it was weird for him in a corporate box in Cardiff, surrounded by fans, trying to watch his team struggle.
They need to change that. I mean, like, not to go down the rabbit hole totally, but it just seems like such an outdated thing that the Lions head coach can't coach a team. There's plenty.
I wonder how much thought was actually put into, could we do it differently to the way Warren Gatland did it in the past?
That just seems to be because Warren Gatland did it. I mean, I don't know if there's rules set in stone, because there's plenty of time now until the tour. So anyway, look, that's probably a podcast for another day.
So obviously Italy must be absolutely kicking themselves as well. I mean, would Ireland still have won? If Italy had their full complement. So just go through their cards. Obviously Amaro with the first yellow towards the end of the first half, and then Ross Vincent for that high tackle which went to the bunker obviously was upgraded to a 20-minute red card. I think that again annoys you, Cian, does it, in terms of the red card, and then obviously the one at the end with Nick O'Terra. We're not quite sure yet if that has been upgraded from a yellow to a red.
We're not sure, but I'd be stunned if it wasn't.
They also lost half their pack. The reason Vincent
and
and Amaro were on the pitch was they lost half their pack to injury, and their scrum half who was playing really, really well. So like a lot went wrong for Italy and went right for it, and part of that is the pressure Ireland were putting on them under, and the physicality they brought to they couldn't live with the physicality they had to get to a level, I guess, to put Ireland under that pressure. But Ireland only conceded 4 penalties today. Italy had 11 or 12, they had 3 cards, and like even the last one, they still had a chance to get the ball back on the pitch and go after a famous win, and it was overturned because of that Nick O'Terra, a bit of craziness at a ruck.
Yeah, thanks for reminding me about to have a rant about that. I think the bunker is a brilliant thing, and I think it's been used really well, but when it's a stonewall red card, I hate that we're not seeing referees just back themselves and give a red card, because that Vincent shot on Hugo Keenan was outrageously reckless. Like, it's the reddest of red cards, and it was telling that the bunker official didn't even take that long to make a decision. So my issue with that is that if you have casual fans just watching the Six Nations and you see a referee give a yellow card, and I know it gets upgraded to a red, but optically I just don't think it looks right, particularly in an era where we're trying to get headshots out of the game. You want young people, their parents watching the matches, not being, concerned about sending their sons or daughters down to play rugby. And I just think it sends out such a bad message, particularly to people who maybe don't fully understand what the bunker is. But Italy will have huge regrets, because, like I said, we all knew how good their attack was, and it was pretty alarming how easily they were able to cut Ireland open. Obviously, Mac Hansen missed that tackle. Gary Ringrose did when Menoncello.
The Menoncello break after that.
It was like scintillating attack, and to think that Lamaro got dropped, like, big decision from the head coach Kissane. He comes on, and the most brainless penalty to give away by slapping the ball out of Gibson Park's
and where it happened as well.
And then he starts throwing his gum shield on the ground. Like, you wanted a big response, obviously, from your captain, and they didn't get that at all. Obviously, as Rudd has highlighted, they lost 3 of their starting forwards as well. But yes, they were still in with a shout of winning. And I think Jack Crowley, I know we're going to get on and talk to him, I think we'll have a lot of regrets about some of the points that he left behind, because at the time you can kind of not almost take it for granted, but maybe gloss over it, but those 2 points really do add up, and they were costly. Well,
let's talk about Jack Crowley and his performance. He missed the conversions for all 3 of Dan Sheehan's tries, really shanked one, and he won't be happy with that.
No, and he does sometimes have issues off the tee. He's a very good kicker, but there's times where he doesn't seem to strike the ball correctly, and absolutely it happened for the one just on the stroke of half-time, Sinead. It was a pretty mixed bag, I thought. I thought his pass for Hugo Keenan's try was delightful.
Yeah.
His ability to take the ball flat to the gain line and play the pass at the last second is a joy to watch, and that was brilliant. He had a couple of another lovely moment where he put Hugo Keenan over for the try, wasn't it? That was disallowed.
Yeah.
So he did lots of stuff well, but the kicking is an issue. He had a couple of defensive issues, and look, certainly I've highlighted my frustrations with Ireland's attack, and look, a lot of that responsibility will come down to the 10 naturally, but I don't think he was helped by Jamieson Gibson Park today, who had, I thought, a pretty poor game. I know he had brilliant crossfield kick for Mac Hansen, which was really good. That's Jamieson Gibson Park at his best, but he seemed so frazzled. Like, he was throwing balls, wild passes out. Like, he's the guy who you want to set the tone. So it felt like they were chasing the score too absolutely, yeah. So I don't think Crowley was helped by maybe Gibson Park's frazzleness. And you're right, Sinead, we've just come from the press conference. I've asked Caelan Doris about that, and look, he was honest enough to admit that there probably was an element of that. And I don't think it was necessarily chasing the score in terms of trying to enhance their points difference, but they, like I said, they're lacking patience. They're trying to force issues, and this isn't something that's just happened, tonight. This has been evident over probably the last year or so, really, and they've gotten away with it lots of times because their attack has been really good, particularly when Andy Farrell is there. We've just touched on his absence. You've Andrew Goodman has come in, and look, his role day to day would generally be kind of running the set play strikes, which was obviously the beauty, as we touched on, for Keenan's try. But he's now taking on the phase play attack, which Andy Farrell runs, and I don't think it's been that encouraging, I have to admit, Ireland's phase play. I think it's dropped off actually considerably, and the standards that Ireland have set for themselves have dropped off as well. And like I said, it's going to be a long time before this team get back together, and they need to hit the ground running in November, because like I said, the summer tour is almost a standalone development tour. Andy Farrell obviously won't be there either, so it's a tricky sort of period to manage in terms of trying to turn the page into what we hope will be a new era.
Attacking Sam Prendergast, Rory.
Sam Prendergast, yeah. I don't think he come on and particularly improved things. I don't think he had his best.
I meant Jack Crowley.
Yeah, well, like Crowley.
Well.
Crowley did some. Cian summed it up pretty well. Like, he did some things well, but I thought his defence. He's only down for one missed tackle, but I thought he soaked a couple of tackles. And we've been hearing a lot about how he's a much better defender than Sam Prendergast, and he didn't put it out there today. And I think what will annoy him is that he didn't put enough out there really to make a statement. It wasn't a statement performance. It was a decent performance, but it probably reminded me of some of the performances he was putting in last year when he was losing the trust of the coaches along the way. I think Simon Easterby gave a fairly
he was asked about it
of his performance, but I also didn't think Prendergast was great when he came on either. He threw one into touch. He was forcing it as well. He did try and put himself about physically, but he was also kind of losing ground whenever the Italians were running at him. They clearly went after him in that area. But I suppose the upside is, obviously, Sexton was here. Ireland now have two very young out halves who've run a Six Nations campaign each effectively, and will both benefit. And at such an early stage of their career, and they're both incredibly talented players. But if Ireland, Jack Crowley has to be aware that his missed kicks were a huge contributor to the fact that Ireland were hanging on against an Italian team in the last 4 or 5 minutes, and he needs it. And he's done it with Munster. It's been an issue as well. He hasn't turned 5s into 7s. He needs to be more ruthless with his kicking, especially if he wants the number 10 jersey. He needs to go out and own it when he's there. So I don't think it was a great day for either of Ireland's 10s, but it wasn't a great day for many of Ireland's players. So the attack is just not functioning the way that it used to, and I think they've changed the way they play, partly because the breakdown is such a mess. And Italy were physically very good today, and they dirtied the ball, and I'd say the quick ball wasn't anywhere near where they wanted to be, which feeds into what Gibson Park was trying to deal with. So it goes back as well to the mental side that Cian mentioned. I mean, Gary Keegan's got a hell of a lot of work
there, isn't there?
They're not in the same space as they were. They're making mistakes, and they're not able to move on from those mistakes, as Cian outlined. And I think that approach needs to be revisited, because that was one of their great strengths when they were at their best. And I guess maybe they're under pressure a lot more than they were then.
Yeah.
You'd wonder how much this week, in terms of the speculation around Jack Crowley's future, impacted him.
There was a lot of attention.
And I'm not saying it necessarily did, but there's no doubt it was a distraction. He certainly could have done with it leaking out next week.
But that's the thing with being a top class,
Well, but even just the fact that it was his big chance as well. That's two big, massive factors going into it. He knew that. That was a lot of pressure on his shoulders.
Yeah, I think, look, everything we know about Jack Crowley is that he's really mentally strong, but he's a human, he's a young guy at the end of the day, and his future is up in the air. Obviously, everyone is hoping that he will stay. You would imagine that it will get sorted, but having that hanging over you the week where you're trying to deliver as close to a 10 out of 10 performance, knowing that there's a younger rival who has been back throughout the course of the championship. Look, as I said, he wouldn't be human if he didn't feel that in some sort of way.
Okay, any other kind of issues? Obviously, Dan, go on, yeah.
Well, just a couple of, it wasn't all bad. I thought Jack Boyle was very good off the bench. He made a really good impact, and Cian Healy obviously saying goodbye tonight. He wasn't involved today, but loosehead was a serious issue for this team, and the kind of depth chart there. So his emergence as a player who's able to come in and impact test games is really positive. The maul, we shouldn't dismiss the fact that they got 2 tries from the maul. It's a very important part of the game, and it's not an area that Ireland have been particularly good at in the last while. So to see them go to it against a team that they would expect, especially they were down to 7 men in the pack for, I think, both of the maul tries, but still, the line-out functioned very well today. The scrum was very strong today. So they're the core pillars of your game. If they're going badly as well as the attack and the defence, then you're in real trouble. Hugo Keenan had probably his best game for a while. I thought he did a lot right. It was great to see, although we've highlighted his defensive issues, it was great to see Mac Hansen kind of being Mac Hansen again. Yeah. We haven't seen him kind of come in and influence the team's attack in the way that he did today for some time, and that was really positive. The way he reprised James Lowe's tap down as well for the try. So there's a lot of negativity, understandably, because of the nature of the performance and the fact that Ireland were kind of hanging on for a win here. But there's little bits that they'll take and they'll put into it. They just need a bit more of them because it's a pretty disappointing way to end. But there's and Gus McCarthy, I think, made a really important tackle after Stephen Varney broke through when it was a 5-point game. So he's another inexperienced player they put on the bench today, and he delivered something for them as well. So there is some bright spots within it. So it's not all bad.
And the reading on the James Lowe when he was.
That was crazy.
It was.
It was crazy. It's because Luke Pearce blew his whistle, I believe. I mean, we didn't have ref mics or replays basically in the stand where we were, but I believe it's because the toucher was put up his flag. Luke Pearce blew his whistle, and the idea is, I guess, once he blows his whistle, the idea is that Italy stopped. If you watch the replays, they didn't stop. How they didn't just hold on for a second, take a breath, and review it. I mean, if Ireland lost here, we would have started there. So, and if the championship coming down to points difference, which is not, there would have been a big issue. So it's another big mistake by the officials, but it didn't have a massive impact in the end.
No.
Good to see Tyke Furlong back.
Sure,
I think it's worth pointing out. You'd always kind of gloss over that, but it's huge to have him back. Look, obviously Ireland aren't going to be the benefactors of that in terms of the next few weeks. Leinster will hope to be, and obviously his Lions' chances, but Thomas Clarkson, I think, is worth a mention. I know he wasn't involved, but we're talking about potentially turning the page to a new era. He had a tough day in Cardiff, but he'll be all the better for that experience. So between Thomas Clarkson, Gus McCarthy and Jack Boyle, there's 3 young guys who are starting to push through now in a position where Ireland do really need a bit more depth. So that would definitely be encouraging for me as well, I think.
And before, let's just look back as well, obviously, at the old era and obviously the last games today for Peter O'Mahony and Conor Murray. I think that was the biggest roar I heard, actually, for when Peter O'Mahony
real
came
sheepish,
on.
wasn't he, when the cameras went on him?
And, they did do their lap of honour at the end. And again, the players spoke about that they wanted to do it for those guys today.
Yeah, I wonder did they over-egg the pudding with that in the end, did it become too much of an emotional...
Do they need to start taking
the
emotion
last week,
out
that's
of
what
it?
it was last week, and it was one of the first things that they said during the week with Caelan Dara. I was like...
It reminded me, at the World Cup, I remember Jack Honan being in the mix zone after they'd lost the quarter-final and the chance of a lifetime to go and win a World Cup, and he was talking about, I'm just glad we couldn't do it for Johnny, and that was crazy to me, that the World Cup itself, and in this competition, winning 3 in a row, and winning a Grand Slam wasn't the primary thing you'd be disappointed for. Look, the 3 of them, it is lovely that they got to sign off with 30,000 Irish people with a lap of honour, that they had to come into a game that needed to be won and have an influence on it. I know Healy wasn't involved, but even Simon Eastby's very effusive in the way that he had helped Jack Boyle be ready for it. It could have been so different. It could have been a bit of glory lifting a trophy. I'm sure they would have got the 3 players to lift the trophy or something along those lines. But they weren't good enough to do it, and that part of that maybe is that they're hanging on to a lot of players in their 30s, and they're starting to look like an older team. But I'm not pinning the blame on the 3 players, but I just wonder were they emotionally, was it the right decision? I didn't call it at the time. I thought it was a good decision when they announced it, to go and get it out there and build the whole thing around it. But afterwards, when they reflect on it, did they put too much on it? Did it put too much pressure on the other players? I'm not sure, but it is nice. Great servants. Everything's been said about them already, but they sign off with leaving they owe Ireland and Irish rugby absolutely nothing, and they deserve to bask and enjoy their evening this evening.
Yeah.
It was telling that they both came on as early as they did for 2 players who are
John van der Fleer
for second game in a row came off, probably didn't have his effective game, probably hasn't been at his best, you'd have to say.
Who I think his Lions chances are
absolutely receding. And he's had been having a really good season, but just wasn't at his best, and it was telling that they went to Peter O'Mahony, who isn't a natural open side, but they felt the need. Conor Murray came on much earlier. It wasn't a tokenistic cap for the last 5 minutes. He came on to at a crucial time of the game, and you've touched on the travelling support. I think we should mention that, and fair play to all the Irish fans who stayed back to acknowledge them, because even last week at the Aviva Stadium, look, I know it's 2 very different things in terms of the the support, as we touched on, Sinead, in our video beforehand. But it was great that, you know, the Irish fans stayed back and acknowledged him, because the Aviva pretty much cleared out last week. While now I know it was a tough defeat. People wanted to get home and all that, but it was a bit of a pity. Obviously, the TV missed Peter O'Mahony walking off, so that was a little bit different today. Maybe the TV director was under strict instructions, and that's why he or she was in his face.
His wife on TV and everything.
Yeah, they picked out their wives as well. But the atmosphere was incredible. It was like being transported back to the World Cup in France. It was amazing. Like, it's not cheap to get here, as Hugo Keenan was telling us during the week, but fair play to all the Irish fans who shelled out big sums of money. Obviously, it wasn't the finale that everyone was hoping for, but it just shows what the Irish rugby support is. We had it throughout the course of the World Cup, and if only we could have something like that at the Aviva Stadium. Even down to simple things like wearing jerseys, like the green. It makes such a big difference, where there's times at the Aviva Stadium where, you know, every second person is in a jumper or a shirt. You know what I mean? So look, I know that's probably another podcast for another day, but it's worth, I think, highlighting how brilliant the Irish rugby fans are on the road.
They got a proper game. Like, it was a proper contest and went right down to the wire. It was, I'm sure from neutrals, it was a great contest. But Ireland, I suppose, we kind of expect them not to be getting into bar brawls with the Italians, and the Italian fans got into it as well, because their team gave them something to get behind. It's kind of remarkable that they've only won one game based on what they put. I think they put out probably their best performance maybe of the championship here today.
Yeah, in the first half. So overall thoughts, obviously we're recording this before the end of Super Saturday. Overall, looking back,
I think Cian used the term anticlimax.
The whole championship.
Well, they started so strong. They carried such good form, certainly the Leinster players, from the kind of the run that they were on. They gave us reason to believe that they could deliver a Grand Slam, and they ultimately were beaten and well beaten by a better team last week. And I don't think it was as bad as November across the full window. I thought November was pretty poor, and I was a little bit alarming at times. But the nature of last week's defeat leading into what happened today, they certainly look like and I've written about this for tomorrow's Sunday Independent, that if they're still considered a top 4 team in terms of being in that elite company with New Zealand, South Africa and France, they're in the relegation zone. I think England are coming for their place in that position, and they need to innovate. They need to work incredibly hard. They need to find new players, because it's really hard to stay at that company. I'm not suggesting they're going to fall away and become a Wales or an Italy anytime soon, but if you want to be in that rarefied air, you've got to be elite all the time. And what we've seen in the last 2 weeks wasn't elite. And really, maybe the wins kind of papered over a few things, but they weren't consistently excellent across 80 minutes in any game. So the performances, while they were encouraging at the start, I guess the flaws that were in them became more and more apparent as it went on. And they didn't deserve to win the trophy. I'm not sure they were the third best team. England seemed to be playing very well today and are, as I say, a bit of a coming force, but they're going to finish either second or first based on what happens. But third place is not good enough based on what Ireland have done in the last couple of years.
Big difference in prize money as well, which is something that we probably don't
at a time when the Irish were cutting back.
That's what I mean. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Rod. They got what they deserved. Like, there's no hard luck story here in terms of Ireland not being able to create history by becoming the first team to win 3 Six Nations titles in a row. As an aside, there's a reason why that's never been done before. It's bloody hard to do. But they didn't, they were not the best team in the Six Nations across the course of the 5 games. And while I do agree with you, like, to be fair, we have to give England some bit of credit for what they've done over the last couple of weeks. But for Ireland to finish third, I think they'll be bitterly disappointed. And it goes back to that bonus point that they gifted to England at the end of the game. And at the time, we had flagged it. We thought it might cost Ireland in terms of going for the title. I don't think anyone was calling that it might actually affect them in terms of finish second or third. So that's another, I think, big regret that they'll have.
Yeah. Okay. Is that it? Everything covered?
It's over. The Six Nations is over.
It's been fun though.
Yeah. It has been fun. It has been fun.
I mean, the stadium's they've already taken on the post. They're getting ready for the
Roma
tomorrow. It's over. On to the Women's Six Nations.
Roll on the Women's Six Nations.
Looking forward to it. Rory and Cian, thank you very much for that. And that is it from us from the Stadio Olimpico.